Hey everybody, I'm Rick Beato. In today's episode, I sit down with Pat Travers, a true icon of 1970s rock and one of the most underrated guitarists of his generation. Pat burst onto the scene with his explosive blend of blues and hard rock, delivering classics like Boom Boom, Out Go the Lights, and Snortin' Whiskey that became staples of rock radio and showcased his incredible guitar work. Here's my interview. Pat, welcome.
Thank you. It's so nice to see you at
You
last.
too.
Yeah, I love this sort of genesis of how I'm actually here.
With Rory.
Is Rory Pastorius came knocking on your door.
Well, he told me, in fairness, he told me he was going to be in town, and I gave him my address. I was like, "Oh, please come by."
Oh, okay. I've changed the story.
No, well,
just walked up and knocked.
But my wife's like, "There's some guy here dressed in a suit," and I was like, "Let me come around." I was like, "Oh, Rory, what's up? Come on in."
Oh, well, that's so awesome.
It was great.
Yeah,
and he's such a
he's a character.
Guy.
Yeah, the whole Pastorius tribe is very
all gifted,
artistic, gifted. Yeah,
wow.
Musically and other ways. Just interesting. Yeah.
So Pat, we were just talking about it's 2025 now, and when did you start touring?
Well, going back, of course, I was born in Toronto in Canada, and we moved around a little bit when I was younger, and ended up in Ottawa, which is where when I turned 12. So my uncle owned a music store there, so I said, "You got to give me a guitar," and he gave me a real cheapy guitar and a Mel Bay easy guitar method guitar book, and I just started playing, and by the time I was 14, I needed an electric guitar, and my first electric guitar was a 68 Gold Top. Yeah.
Where's that guitar now?
It got stolen about a year and a half later.
Oh, man.
That's crazy. Anyway, so my older brother, Kevin, played bass, and my school buddy, Stephen Peacock, played drums. And we started getting at it, playing. Of course, at that time, it was Hendrix and Cream, and, of course, the Beatles. And we played everything, Creedence Clearwater. It was great because it was classic rock, and we were learning it in its first iteration, At first, I just played guitar. I wasn't a singer or vocalist, so we ended up getting a pretty good singer, tall guy named Jeff. And so then we just started, you could play bars in Ontario and Quebec when you were 15.
Yeah.
Then nobody said
I'm from
shit.
Rochester, and you could go.
So it's the same.
Yeah, and you go into bars when you're 15 years old back then, and go see music, whatever, play in bands.
So I started playing in 6 nights a week, 5 sets a night when I was 15, and of course we just played cover material and stuff. And
what would your rig be back then?
I had a Trainer, which was a Canadian amplifier company. They actually made pretty good stuff.
They did.
Trainer 50-watt top and a 212 Trainer cab. That thing sounded great. I had no fuzz box, no nothing. You could just, turn it up to about 3 or 4, and it just got this nice distortion,
And what guitar were you playing then?
The story of the guitars. Well, the first one was the Gold Top Les Paul with the P90s on it.
Yep.
I got stolen one night after we finished playing it.
Did you leave it on stage or something? It got stolen?
We had just finished playing at this bar that we always played. It was about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And I went out to the car, and nobody followed me, so I just leaned my guitar case up against the car and ran back in to either get the keys or say, "Hey, come on, it's freaking cold out here."
Yeah.
Got back, it's gone.
Oh, my God.
So I was super upset. I was only 15, and I was very upset. And my mom, who co-signed the loan on the Les Paul, co-signed another loan on a SG, which was a little cheaper, and Pete Townsend played one, so I was okay with that, and I had it hung way down low, and I did my windmills in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
Anyway, we were playing at this, once again, I was probably by this time only 16, at this bar, and we're in a frenzy at the end of the night, and I think I dropped my pick, so I'm just smacking it with my hand like this, and it just broke. The neck just came off at the body. I'd never seen that. Well,
wow.
I'd never seen it since, let's just say. They usually crack up at the headstock. I proceeded to trash it because I was, in the frenzy. I needed another guitar, and I don't even know how I met this guy or where he came from, but he had another SG, actually a better one, had humbuckers on it, because mine just had the black P90s. Yeah. It was like $200, no case.
Nice.
Yeah. Where's that coming from? I'm not asking.
No case, don't ask.
No case.
Yeah.
$200. Here you go. So I had it for about 2 weeks, and then about 8 o'clock in the morning, one morning at the little basement apartment we were all living in, there was a knock at the door, and I answered. It was a cop, and he said, "Do you have a red Gibson guitar SG model?" And I went, "Yes, I do." I was lucky I didn't get arrested, I just handed it to him. So 3 guitars. I'm 16. There's no way I can go to my mom and say, "Can you co-sign another loan for me?" Somehow or another, I ended up getting a Hagstrom Suite. I don't know if it looks like a Les Paul.
Yeah, I know it is.
And it was a cheap copy of a Les Paul, and I got that, and I played that for a couple of years. And then when I was about 19, we're playing in this big club in Quebec called the Chaudière. Ronnie Hawkins comes in, who's this famous rockabilly guy who, from Arkansas originally, but did well in Canada in the early 60s, so he moved up there. And his band was the band. Robbie Robertson, Rick Danko, Levon Helm, Garth Hudson. They were called the Hawks, and that was his band.
Unbelievable.
And he'd had a number of other guys. Roy Buchanan played with him for a while. He saw me play when I was maybe 19, just about 20. He said, he called me, he had that broad Arkansas accent, which in Canada was so exotic.
Right.
And he goes, "Kid, you should come up and play with me, or come down here and play with me in Toronto." And I went, "Okay, I'll do that." So he gave me his number, and a week or two later, I called him, and he says, "Well, I don't really have a position for you right now, but let's stay in touch." And I thought that was pretty cool, So I joined another band, another bar band, and I just started rehearsing with them, maybe for a week or so. And I got a call from Ronnie, and he says, "Can you come down here now?" I went, "Hell yeah." So at that point, I figured, because I was going to be playing all this rockabilly music from the late 50s, early 60s, I needed a telly. So I went to Long and McQuaid's in Toronto, this music store, and they had a black custom Telecaster with a humbucker on it and a single coil. Yeah. Just like the one Keith Richards used. Yeah, for a long time. Yeah. With a maple neck. So I got that and a little Ampeg 212 combo, totally clean. So I had no effects, nothing. Okay. I'm gone now from Hendrix and Cream and to totally clean. And he gave me a stack of 45s And he said, kid, I want you to listen to these and learn them and get the same sound. Don't change the sound. I want you to play and to get the guitar to sound exactly like it sounds on those records. And if you do that, you will be one of the best guitar players. He actually said that. And of course, I believed him and I did it. And so I played with Ronnie, doing all rockabilly and stuff for a year. And but that was, about all I could do. It was time to move on. So I went back to Ottawa and played just in some bar bands for a couple of months. And then a guy I knew who had some money said, you need to get out of here.
Okay.
And maybe London, England would be a good place for you to go. He provided me with, airplane tickets and a little bit of cash to get started over there. And
what year would this have been?
That was 75.
Okay.
Yeah, May of 75, right after my 21st birthday. So I just turned 21. So I'd already been, at it for a long time. For years, yeah.
Yeah.
Talk about your 10,000 hours. I had those, So literally, suitcase, guitar, get to Heathrow, and ask somebody, where's downtown London? There is no downtown London. There's a central London, I guess, I said, well, where do people go? What do they do? And they usually go to Victoria Station and stash their luggage and figure it out from there. And that's what I did.
So I started playing guitar in 75, 76. And I started listening to you and, within a couple of years, 77, 78. But I didn't know your origin story because you didn't know anyone's origin story. You didn't know anything about any of the musicians.
You had a little bit on an album and maybe in a Cream interview, and that was it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You'd know what country bands were from, but if you didn't, but there was really little information about anything other than what was on the back of an album.
Right, yeah. Well, mystery was good in a way. Remember, nobody knew what Steve Miller looked like for years,
Right. I still don't know what he looks like, and I've seen pictures of him.
That's true.
I was if I saw Steve Miller, I would know. I would know Steve Miller.
But yeah. It's funny because I ran an interview with one of the engineers studio engineers that I worked with, I think at Advent, and they were interviewing him, and they said, "Oh, you worked on a Pat Travers album. Did you know he was Canadian?" And he went, "No, not really, because it didn't really matter."
When people talk about going to see Hendrix, nobody mentioned that he was American.
No.
When all the people were going to see him in London, no one.
No.
When you hear any of the people recount it, whether it's McCartney or Pete Townsend or anyone,
no,
Clapton,
they never mentioned
that he was American. Right.
No.
That never came up.
No. Well, he was a phenomenon for sure at that time, and the Brits have a way of. And they did that with me.
Mm-hmm.
My mom was English, my dad was Irish. So I was, they emigrated to Canada from after World War II. So I felt comfortable in that environment, pretty much.
Okay, what was the first time that you walked into a studio? Because this is another thing that I think that people don't realize. It was very hard to get in a studio ever.
When I was lucky.
Okay, tell me about it.
It was in London because I went over pretty much by myself and didn't have a demo tape. Did
you have money?
I had a little bit of money to
just to get set up,
rent a small flat and buy some food and just poke around and see what was going on.
Yeah.
And then I figured, well, I need a demo. So I had the original guy, they flew over. And we got, I hired some musicians out of the Melody Maker, back of the Melody Maker magazine, and one of them, the drummer, was a guy named Nicky Heaton from Dover, long-haired hippie. Well, he was a long-haired hippie one day, and then he was a spiky punk in the Clash. He was Topper Heaton.
Right? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he was my first drummer.
Amazing.
And he played on my first demo. And I had a guy named Steve, who was with a band called Vinegar Joe, which Robert Palmer was the lead singer of, right? So I had just the bass player and drummer, and we went, and it was a 16-track studio.
Now, had you ever been in a studio?
Never been in a studio.
Did you know what it was going to be like?
No, but I'll tell you what, I just was gone. I mean, I was so excited to see this console and these microphones and this, even though it was only 16-track, it was still a 2-inch tape machine, you know. And I was just gone. I was drinking tea, and just for hours it was the most funnest thing I ever did in my life. I remember putting the headphones on to do vocals and hearing like a Neumann 87 microphone for the first time, you can hear your tongue going, you go, holy shit, you know, just everything was so exciting. And what's that do when you turn that knob, you know, obsessive compulsive.
Yeah.
Or, you know, not obsessive compulsive, but I just got, you know,
you were into it.
I was super into it.
Okay, so how did they record things back then? The first time you're in there, were you all in the same room? Did you have gobos?
No, it was a pretty good studio.
Okay.
So we had a drum isolation booth.
Yep.
And we could isolate the guitar amp. I just had a 50-watt Marshall with a 412 cap.
Okay.
And I guess we had a little bass amp, and we probably DI'd it too. And just recorded that way.
Okay, so you record and then you go and hear playback. What's it like when you're hearing this playback?
Well, of course, first time you hear your voice, you're not that thrilled, you know. No.
Right.
That takes some getting used to.
Yeah.
Because I had only ever done backing vocals and sung the occasional song, you know. And then, of course, I did a guitar overdub. And that's when I really started to go, oh, I really like this. Because, you know, the first time you hear a double track of your own guitar, it's like, oh, man, or even a double track of your own voice.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's just spectacular. So I was lucky. And just like Nuno, I was just like Nuno. I remember when he asked me to record with him on the Portagrafini album years ago, and he was out in L.A. with Michael Wagner.
Yep.
But Michael never got anywhere near that console. Nuno was like, you know, it was, and that's what I was like. Get away from me! I know what I'm doing. You know, I just loved that. It was
for those of you that don't know this, I mean, Nuno Bettencourt you're his biggest influence. I mean, he reveres you.
It's incredible. Yeah, he
and just got up on stage with you. And
2 weeks ago.
And it was
the
incredible. Video is insane.
Yeah.
Go back to your recording experiences. So you get get this demo tape.
I got this demo tape. I didn't know there were no original songs.
Yeah.
They were all. I did a ZZ Top cover. I did Statesboro Blues.
Okay, there you go.
Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo.
Yeah.
And Magnolia by J.J. Cale. And I think Magnolia was the one that got me my first record deal. And after I had the tape or the cassette or whatever, I started calling up the record companies and the A&R people and trying to make appointments because I didn't know. And, that's not the way it went. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But
there were no books. There was no information on that.
I certainly didn't have
and if
one.
you didn't know someone that had a record deal before,
I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
So I made an appointment. I'd call up whoever, Polydor or CB, I call up the record companies and ask for the A&R department and go, hi, my name's Pat Travers. I'm a new guy. I just came from Canada and I'm here and I've got a demo and I'm interested in getting a record deal. And I got about 6.
You were signed by Polydor, weren't you, at one point?
Not at first.
Not at first.
At first, it was Polygram,
okay.
which was their sister company,
Yeah.
which was also Mercury
Yes.
Records,
Yep.
which was a big label.
Yes.
And so I got signed to them all by myself. I didn't have a manager. It was the world's worst record deal.
That's the rite of passage, right?
But then, I started going, I need a manager, or people talk, I can't do this. I don't know what I'm doing. And so I started making appointments with management companies, and I just didn't meet anybody I liked. And but then this guy called me, this fellow, his name is David Hemmings, and he got in touch with me, and I met him, and he said, look, you got a shitty deal. You need a manager. And, he was from Birmingham, England, which is the Midlands, which is a different kind of guy, than a Londoner. And so I said, okay. I said, if you can fix up this record deal and do all that, I'll sign with you. So we left Polygram and went with Polydor, which was the Who.
That's right.
Jimi Hendrix, Cream. Polydor was like, for me, was the perfect
place.
label. That was the place to be.
Yeah. And did you have an A&R person there?
Yeah, a guy named Terry Condon, but he didn't have anything to do with signing. What happened was I got a publishing deal with Warner Chappell.
Warner Chappell, yeah.
First. And there was the managing director over there was a guy named Roland Rennie, who was an old record guy, just perfect, been there through the 50s and 60s in the UK and seen all that whole thing.
Yeah.
And he gave me just great advice, and they let me use their little 4-track demo studio down in the basement of the record store they had on, I forget the name of the street, Central London. So I made some more demos, and Roland took them over to a guy named Freddie Hine, this Dutch guy who managed Golden Earring, and he was now the managing director of Polydor.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
And he heard this stuff, and I guess it was, exciting and a 4-track, and he just loved that rawness, the energy of it. So they signed me, and then assigned me to a guy named Terry Condon. And I recorded, they had a studio there too, in the middle of the building. It was amazing. Hendrix recorded there. It was crazy.
When you're recording then, you got a record contract. How does this work exactly?
They never bothered to and my manager wouldn't let them in the studio.
So they had no input at all?
None.
Okay.
But I was really glad later.
Yeah.
Because, it's hard enough, especially when you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
To have all these other people trying to tell you what to do. So, I guess everybody assumed I could write my own material, and I had not up to that point. And then I just said, I gotta do this, and I did it, and it was torture. It's still not the easiest thing to do. It's easier now. I don't second guess myself so much, and have a little more confidence. But when you first get started, it's you're writing these lyrics, and you know, maybe it's like late at night and you've been drinking and go, yeah, that's good. Yeah, I like that. And the next morning you get up and, oh man, that sucks, you know. And then you go, I got to be in the studio in 2 hours and I have to sing this, you know. So it's like, it's just shitty times. But
so how did you connect with Tommy, Aldridge, Pat Thrall? How did you connect with those guys?
That was another weird thing. Well, before Tommy, I had Nico McBrain on drums.
Right.
You know, not a shabby drummer.
That's
there,
right.
Who I talked to just a week ago. Nico at first was great, and I loved him, and we had the best time personally and musically. But then he just started to get so difficult in the studio, and it was really frustrating for me.
What, just arguing with you?
Yeah, we just started really butting heads.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't working for me. So by late in 77, with the whole punk thing in England,
yep,
it was very difficult for us to do what I was doing.
Yeah.
You know, because there was no way to get any press or anything like that. You were a dinosaur.
Yeah.
Now. But we were selling tons of records in Texas and Chicago and the Bay Area and Boston as imports.
Yes.
So Polygram USA says, no, we want to sign you. So that whole thing changed. And Freddie Hine also got promoted to Polygram USA, so I got to go with him. But we needed a drummer, and my manager said, "Have you ever heard of this guy, Tommy Aldridge?" I said, "Yeah, Black Oak, Arkansas." It was 1984 or 74. It was the California Jam.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
And he did this drum solo. And I went, oh, man, that guy's awesome. I said, yeah, we'll take him. So never met him, never saw him play other than on TV. We were in New York City, and we had shows coming up in the middle of January. And he was in Chicago, so he flew in. And, you know, he's got this crazy hairdo bull, and he's from, like, Mississippi or Tennessee, so he talks like this, which is totally different than what I got going on.
Right.
'Cause I got all these guys from England, from Scotland, from East London, you know. So it was awesome. It was really fun. So he shows up, and, hey, Tommy, all right. So we got SIR. And we start rehearsing. He sucks.
Oh.
I'm going, oh, what the fuck are we going to do here? Because he can't play my material.
Okay. Wow.
He's nervous as F, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at Mars, I'm going, what are we going to do? We got to play for the record company in like less than 2 weeks, you know? And so a friend of ours, this drummer, Alan Schwartzberg, you'd never heard of him, but he was one of the biggest session drummers in New York City at that time. And he played on all the disco stuff. He didn't even own a set of drums.
Okay.
He would just bring a set of drumsticks, and he'd go to 5 studios a day and just go, that's what he did.
Sure.
But when I fired Nico, we were going to go back to England, and then they wanted us to do a show down in Florida. And I said, we don't have a drummer. And my manager says, well, if I get the best session drummer in New York, will you do it? And I'm going, oh, okay. So they bring in this guy, Alan Schwartzberg. He's incredible. He pulls it off somehow. So I fell in love with Alan, and I would see him from time to time. And he popped into SIR when we're rehearsing, and he's watching Tommy stumble through all this shit, right? And I'm going, oh boy. And I go, let's take 5, right? So I go, Alan, how are you? And he goes, this is your drummer. This guy right here is your drummer. I'm going, what's he seeing that I'm not seeing? But I had to trust him. I trusted this guy. So, we rehearsed for a little while. We finally get to the gig. It's a place called My Father's Place in Long Island, small club.
Yeah.
And they do a simulcast on WLAR, the FM station out there. And we start playing, and Tommy is freaking awesome. He's just doing all this shit. It just was magic. So he's just not a studio drummer.
Right.
He's a live guy, and that was that. The drums started flying apart. He had this English roadie, Colin Clayton, who's from East London. He did the announcement on our live album. Hello, music. That was Colin, right? They couldn't understand each other. It was hilarious. It was Tommy from, Arkansas and Colin from East London, and we put those two together. It was so funny.
Okay, so I always wondered who's playing what solos on what songs with you
Pat
and
plays
Pat.
fast.
Pat plays the fast licks, right? I mean, that's
basically
it.
And he did a lot of ambient stuff too, swelling.
Were you using a flanger? What were you using? Both were using a flanger, right?
He brought, when he came from San Francisco, he brought these 88 flangers. Or one of them. And we got to get those. So we got a bunch of them. We all used them. My bass player used them.
Yeah.
And I had two. And they had a great chorus sound. The chorus was very unique.
Yeah.
Just very cool. And then you could set them to go, and do that. So I had two.
So what was your rig and what was Pat's rig back then? Like on the live record, what are you guys playing through? Guitar tones are great.
I had a 50-watt Marshall.
Yeah.
A 100-watt Marshall.
Okay.
The 50-watt I'd turn up. Once again, I used no overdrive.
Okay.
Nothing. Just the 50 I ran at 4.
Okay.
The 100-watt about 1.5 or 2 to clean up the bottom.
Yeah.
And then I had a 122 Leslie as well, which I had another 100-watt.
And how did you actually? How did you go through the Leslie? What kind of a pedal did you have to do that?
I had one of those.
They didn't have a Trek 2 or anything like that
No,
back
because
then.
I had a Farfisa organ.
Yeah.
And it had one of those big chrome pedals with 2 buttons on that you plug the Leslie cable in.
Yeah.
And then it would come out of that and go into an amp. So it was just a big pedal on the floor. And the Leslie cable went in here.
Yeah.
And then you had fast, slow, and then an output.
How did you mic the things?
Just one mic on the baffle and one mic on the horn. Yeah, I like that whap 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 sound.
Yeah.
And then in the studio, I'd use like LA2As or compressors to get rid of the pulsing.
Right.
So the needle would stay like that. So you just got the effect. So, it didn't go wham, wham. You heard that, but the volume actually didn't change that much.
And what did you guys use to record? How would you mic things? What was as far as the amplifiers and?
I just put a 57.
Yeah.
Or 414s, I think is the AKG 414. 414.
Yeah.
You put them both up and check. You can't use them both. They get phase problems. But sometimes one, in some cases, will sound better than the other. But that's what I would use mostly.
And would Pat have a similar rig?
Yeah, he'd have a 100-watt Marshall
and then you guys would just pan your guitars to each side then, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean it.
But I always wondered who played what though.
Yeah.
I mean
Pat's
that
fast. Pat's faster than me.
But you guys have similar styles, though.
Well, we blended well together, and we got along great. I mean, that was the other thing.
He's a
Neil
nice
Shaun
guy.
was asking how Pat Thrall got. It was Neil Shaun who introduced me to Pat, because Neil was a fan, and the first time we played in San Francisco, he came to the show.
Wow!
And I was a fan of his, and we're the same age. And it was just amazing. Here I am in San Francisco with Neil Shaun, and you know, and after I said I really would like to have another guitar player, and he said, I know just the guy. And
wait, was Pat from San Francisco?
Yeah, Alameda.
Okay.
Yeah, across the bay, and. Pat was in New York, and I forget exactly, but we got together, and he just came out on the road with us for a while, and we would just jam, and he'd get up and play a little bit, and then he was, you know, that's how you did it back then. It was cool. Just got to kind of know each other a little bit, and then so we toured for a few months and then went and recorded an album.
When you walked in today, you looked at my M3 organ, and you seemed to be
very familiar.
Very familiar, and you seem to be really knowledgeable about just all the stuff around the studio here.
Yeah.
You're one of those kind of guys, right?
Yeah. Well, and I have a real feeling for the Hammond B3 and the rotating speaker. It does something to me. The Steppenwolf's first album, I still don't know exactly how they got that particular sound. I don't think it's because they did make some organs with a single, which just had one speaker in it.
Interesting.
And Give Me Some Lovin', Stevie Winwood.
Yeah.
That's one of those.
Okay.
That's not like that Leslie. It's not like that. And neither is that one on the Steppenwolf album. It's just one speaker that's going.
So this is interesting, is that, and if anyone knows out there about that, any details?
I would love to know exactly, because that organ sound on that album is something I started searching for on my guitar, because I just love that grind.
Well, this is an interesting thing, is like, how do people record things like this that really kind of have a stereo sound? Because everybody had their own way of doing it, and you didn't, unless you went to other studios and worked with different engineers.
You didn't know.
You didn't know. Everybody did their own thing.
And I was so lucky to start recording in London, England, because the caliber of
tell me about some of the studios and the engineers.
The engineers, the system they had worked really well. You were a young kid, 15, and you were, interested in music and recording, and so you just showed up at a studio and hoped they didn't kick you out, and emptied a trash can and made some tea and just kept your mouth shut and watched and looked, and then maybe somebody would say, hey, can you move that microphone over there?
That's how it starts.
And you'd wonder, why am I, and you'd start to learn a little at a time about mic choice, mic placement, instrument placement, because, in the early days, it was, you didn't have a whole bunch of outboard gear.
Right.
That's right. You only had a few tricks, and so then you became a tape op, because there was no,
that's the next level up.
The tape machines were in a different room.
That's right.
And all you had was a tape counter and an illegal pad. And they had a little microphone in the console in the other room. And the producer would go, Mark! And you'd write down whatever number was on the counter.
What the take was and stuff.
He could roll back and go, you made a mistake here, or whatever.
Yeah.
And then eventually you'd get moved out of there and maybe be assistant engineer. And so, all the great producers and engineers in London, they all started like that. And it worked. It was a good system.
Yeah, I interviewed Alan Parsons here, and he talked.
We're doing a cruise. He's going to be on a cruise.
Oh, cool.
And I met him before, but I didn't get to talk to him. And I used to listen to his albums, like to learn how to balance effects and vocal, because he was so good at it. And he came from EMI.
Yeah, he came through that.
Yeah.
He came through that whole system.
That whole system.
Tape op, the whole thing.
Yeah.
I had a track sheet, not a track sheet, but it was. He explained to me it was I got it when I did a video at Abbey Road.
Oh yeah.
And they have a Pink Floyd from Studio 3, their setup sheet, like
Right,
where they
yeah,
were
yeah.
in the room. So. And it says AP on it. I said, "Is this your writing?"
Yeah.
Right, and he said, "Yes."
Oh,
so
how
Alan
cool!
Parsons, right?
So he did the Dark Side.
He did Dark Side,
Side of the Moon.
But he said that anytime Pink Floyd came in, he made sure he got on the schedule first,
Right.
so he'd be the engineer on it.
Right. Yeah. Well, why not? I mean, they made incredible albums.
Yeah.
But like we were talking about earlier, like mic choice,
Yep.
mic placement,
Yep.
all that stuff is, even before you start to get electronic, there's a whole bunch of things that have to happen,
Did you record at Olympic Studios?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just one time. And I wasn't all that impressed,
Okay.
But boy, they did some stuff in there, the Stones.
Oh, yeah.
They
They did the first Zeppelin record there.
Yeah.
Which is a great
Incredible.
sounding record. Did you guys play with Van Halen ever?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What was that like?
I gotta write a book, man.
What
Or
was
not
that?
me. I gotta sit and talk with somebody and have them write it. The best show I ever did was 1978, Oakland, California.
Okay.
It's Oakland Stadium, Day on the Green, Bill Graham show, right? It's Aerosmith, headline, Foreigner, my band, AC/DC, and Van Halen.
Oh my God.
5 bands starting at 11 a.m.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if Van Halen went on first or AC/DC did. One of them did. It didn't matter. And of course, Bill Graham was the best. And the backstage area had AstroTurf and tables and umbrellas.
So were you all you guys hanging out together back there?
Oh, yeah. And
Oh
he
my
had
God.
trailers and everybody's hanging out together back then. That was the first time I met Steven Tyler. And it was so funny because somebody from my record company, and I mean, this is all brand new for me, but I'm in the rocking chair. I'm in the middle.
Yeah.
We got the best slot of the day.
Right.
And Bill was Bill Graham was super helpful to us. But so somebody from my record company says, "Pat, you got to meet Steven Tyler." And I went, "Yeah, I just got to meet Steven Tyler." So they walk me over. He's sitting in a chair underneath an umbrella with a frozen daiquiri, and he's got big mirrored aviators and biggest dive watch I ever saw. And he's just sitting there, and someone goes, "Hey, Steven, this is Pat Travers. Pat, this is Steven." I go, "Hey, Steve, how you doing?" He goes, "My fucking lips are killing me." I liked him, just loved him immediately. I went, "That's my kind of." He just didn't get it. I mean, he had chapped lips because it was so dry out there. you know. But he forgotten that, oh, by the way, your lips are so big you can whisper in your own ear, But it was funny. There's a great picture of Eddie and Pat Thrall and myself on that backstage. Real
Wow.
good. Yeah, we just look
He was a
great.
kid.
Oh, man. We look awesome. Just 3 guitar players, just 24 years old, just smoking.
I was alive then.
Yeah.
I was 16 years old then.
The incredible thing about me is, I say, okay, I was born in Toronto, But I lived there till I was about 4, and then my family moved to northern Ontario to little towns. And, nothing was going on up there. And then to Ottawa when I was 12, and that's when I, started making music. But then when I got to London, I met about the third night I was in London, I met Ginger Baker, Brian Ferry, and Chris Squire, all in the same frickin' night at the same club. It was incredible.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And then I got to jam with Jack Bruce for a couple of days. Are you crazy? How'd that happen? It was cool.
So you guys did the live record was around 79.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what was the record? Black Pearl? Was that it?
Yeah, that was one of my best albums.
Yeah, that was about 82, something like that.
82. It came out the end of 82, 83, and that's when we went on tour with Aerosmith, which, because I'd gone through, unfortunately, a period where parted with management.
Yeah.
With a lot of legal problems. I had to do a bankruptcy. This was not fun. It was no fun. And that's when Doc McGee came in and saved my ass. And but we made a fantastic record. We had the Aerosmith tour. MTV had just started. Just started. We made a couple of videos. But because of the bullshit of having to spend almost a year in court and screwing around, and by that time, all my record company people had moved on. And just everything had changed.
Yeah, when that happens, people don't know this even because the music business isn't anything like it was. But
no,
when you lose your people,
the new people don't want to have anything to do.
No, they have
with
their
it.
own
They
artists,
got their own guys,
that they want to.
So that was the situation, and there were other things happening too. I mean, personal things, and so things just started to go pretty south for me there for a while. In the 90s, and just couldn't seem to get any traction after that for a long time. And
so Pat, you're out playing. You still tour all the time.
Well, I have to tour. I have to make a living, and we're working on a new record right now for Cleopatra.
Okay.
Brian Pereira, who's the president of that company, is just an incredible guy. He's really cool. And doing some shows, and I've got, you saw my drummer and my bass player.
Who are amazing.
David Pastorius and Alex Petrosky. And we also now have a violinist that we're working with, a gal.
Awesome.
And she's so cool. It's just...
his band is amazing.
Yeah. And, of course, Nuno's going to contribute some stuff on the new album. So a lot of cool things happening right now. Yeah. I'm excited.
Nuno has his own Pat Travers Spotify playlist.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Why I shouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. So I'll maybe I can share that somehow in the description on here in the video.
Yeah.
But
so, and then hopefully later this year, summertime, I guess we'll actually do some shows with Extreme.
Fantastic.
So, but I'm very excited about working on this new material. It's funny because for a while I just wasn't. I just didn't feel like, but then all of a sudden I did. And David and Alex, they really inspire me.
Yeah. You guys like to jam, right?
We can jam, yeah. But beyond that, building tunes and architecture of all the music and stuff, that's where I really like. And I'm just like I say, I'm loving the violin because it's the way I'm hearing it and the way it's going to fit in. It's not going to be ELO, believe me. It's going to be something much more aggressive and cool. Dramatic. So,
well, Pat, it's been an honor having you here.
My pleasure. I'm so happy.
Finally, we got it together.
I'm coming back here. We're gonna
anytime, man. Yeah. Come back and do some recording.
Well, we could do that. We definitely could do that. Let's definitely do that.
I was ready to put up the mics when those guys were jamming. I was like, I was going to get you drag a guitar amp in there for you and everything.
Okay. Well, we'll do that next time.
Awesome.
All right, brother.
Awesome. Thanks, Pat.
Thank you.